So continuing with our journey on this particular unit, managing people in organization, what we want to be able to look at is after understanding recruitment and selection in learning outcome 1, we went to understanding once the person is working within the organization, job description is given, how do we look at measuring performance, why is it important, how do we do benchmark, different methods of measuring performance. Then if we find gap areas at the end of the year when we do performance appraisal or any sort of appraisal which is done like 360-degree management by objectives, there are a few ways in which organizations can do appraisals. What we looked at was the appraisals pick up gap areas or areas in which the employees, staff require training and development, and that came across in learning outcome 3 when we understood why we need to train employees within the organization, what are the different types of trainings which can be given. So we looked at the concept of training, but through the medium of coaching, training through the medium of mentoring, training through the medium of counseling, and then why sometimes organizations, when they look at recruiting and selection and when they look at appraisals, they also look at doing what is called the psychometric tests. And this is to understand the personality of the individual. This is also to understand how individuals behave, what the kind of learning cycle or the affinity to the learning is done in terms of whether what kind of learning style they have, and obviously how do they best learn. So the organization tries to then provide an environment through which they can look at some sort of systematic and continuous learning. Now, after understanding that, and it has been identified that the employees need to be developed, they need to be trained, or they need to be provided training to be able to upskill or remove some of the gap areas which have been spotted during the performance appraisal. We get into the learning outcome 4, wherein we are going to be essentially focusing on something to understand how do organizations make the employee training effective. So here we are going to look at some of the basics of understanding things like what are the 5 elements of a learning organization, key elements that we want to look at. We also want to see and understand what are these elements and why they are related to something which is called the training cycle in the company. And then we want to understand some of the characteristics of this particular training cycle to understand why following this particular route, training and organizational training, which can be done through seminars, conferences, webinars, any sort of one-on-ones that the employees attend, how it becomes effective, and what are these characteristics which make that effective. Now, in the merit criteria, what we're looking at doing is extending the elements of understanding training, but in that, what we need to be able to do is relate it to yourself in terms of what kind of scenarios or under what situations you think you are able to learn effectively, and then how is it then implemented, on a particular person. And then the second part would be to look at, understanding the advantages and disadvantages primarily of, the training methods, various types of training methods that we will look at, and that will be something that will cover up this particular learning outcome. So let's briefly get into it by understanding, what do you mean by learning organization? Now, when we look at, defining that the organization needs to, say, for example, put their employees and staff into some sort of training, we've had a number of definitions which have been, kind of defined by various authors over the years which have done research in this particular area. But if I have to literally look at what is a learning organization, as per Wikipedia, I would primarily say that, a company which facilitates, a company which tries to provide opportunities of continuously, bettering an employee or, improvements in the areas where employees need it, would be coined as something called a learning organization. Sometimes in our personal life, we say that, you make mistakes, but you need to learn from those mistakes and move on. Similarly, when we look at learning organizations, what we are looking at here is that it refers to a company or an organization which constantly monitors, its environment for changes and learns and adapts from these changes. Now, this particular term was actually coined, as it says on the slide, by, Harvard's, he was a professor in Harvard, and it was coined by Chris and then later on, it was amended by Peter Senge, who's also a very highly acclaimed, business strategist in this particular area. Now, he said in one of his trainings that, organizations which do not adapt get left behind. That means if you take up an example of, businesses that we have seen, we use computers every day. But to give an example, if you look at, businesses which were sold off, say, for example, when you look at IBM as a business, now, a number of years back, they sold off, this particular business to a company called Lenovo in China. Now, they felt that this as a business was moving quite fast, and IBM as an organization was not keeping on top of the changes which are happening within this IT side of the industry. And they decided that it was best to get out of this business by selling it off rather than continuing and dragging the organization down in terms of losses and, having an effect on profitability. So here the point that I'm trying to make with that example is that sometimes organizations consciously take decisions to do away with certain business or segments which they feel are not a part of their overall or long-term strategy. So IBM decided to do that. Now, if you look at another company like Dell, sticking with this IT sector example, Dell started to lose market share sometime in the late 2009 and 10. The reason why that happened was the market was changing. The introduction of tablets and smartphones meant that PC was not the only device, or laptop was not the only device to access internet. You could do other functions like emailing, calling, sending photographs, messages through also a smartphone and a tablet. Now, because they had realized that if they do not change and if they do not introduce a new lineup which matches what others are providing in the market, then as an organization, Dell could also face the same kind of outcome which IBM's PC division faced in 2002, 2003. So what they did was, as an organization, the senior management basically looked at studying these changes in the market and adapted the business model to move the organization into introducing products which are not just, products which were selling in the market, but also latest product offerings which were related to, tablets and smartphones. So this ability for the organization to be able to learn, constantly monitor the changes happening, and changes, when I say changes happening in terms of consumer demand, happening in terms of what are the products and services the customers want, and then learning from what the competitors are offering, and then bringing those changes into the organization to change the business model is actually reflecting what is called a learning organization. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. So when we look at a small business, sometimes you look at, we are now in Easter break, but when you look at some of the, retailers, they're advertising in the market. When you look at holiday, companies like Thomas Cook, Thomson, you Jet to Holidays, they're all advertising. But now, because when we are in the Easter break, what they realize is a lot of competitors who were trying to get business from customers to book holidays and travel during this 2-week period. If they did not advertise, then they will never get the business from the consumers. They will never be able to book holidays or provide these opportunities to make revenue. So if you are able to react and see and adapt to what the competition are offering and immediately introduce a scheme or a product relating to what the competition is talking about, then it shows adaptability, and that shows that the organization is able to quickly learn by looking at its changes happening in the environment and then basically providing a similar offering. So sometimes you see Me Too offers coming across, that most companies, what they will do is they will basically, one company introduces that, okay, you buy 2, get the 3rd one free. Now this kind of a promotion you see from pretty much all the retailers during Christmas or, big holiday seasons, wherein the shopping tends to happen, like the Black Friday sale, the Easter sales, which are now on. Sometimes you will see one company introduces this and other companies follow suit. So this shows an example of, what the organization is looking at is they are looking at the elements of understanding what the competitors are offering in the market, the changing demand or the, need for customers' demand, and then they are able to adapt and offer the pretty much, offer and adapt, basically adapt and then offer the same kind of offering which the others are offering in order to get business. So that would be the concept of, when we look at learning organization. Now, when we look at, there are 5 elements to learning organization. There is something called system thinking. Now, when I say system thinking, I've defined that, these 5 stages, but apart from that, there are other things which I look at, elements. When I say personal mastery, shared vision, you have mental methods, and then you have team learning. Now, each of this, in terms of the elements of learning, when I have to explain, what does system thinking? Now, system thinking basically looks at an organization which has developed some sort of a model to make decisions using data, or using, for example, relevant data points which are which could be, statistics, which could be numbers, but these are things which they can actually look at from a point of view of understanding that they lead or kind of give some sort of a definite outcome. So when I say the idea of system thinking, it's the idea of learning the organization pretty much develops from some sort of systems they employ in the organization. Now, these systems could be customer relationship management system, it could be an accounting system, it could be a payroll system, it could be a marketing system. Now, why is it system-based thinking? Because when you put data into the system, it will give you certain type of output or reports, and those reports will give you a structured, outcome to say that this is what is outstanding. So if I take an example of an accounting system which the company has, and they issue a number of invoices, what you will see is that the company at some stage has issued a number of invoices. If you generate a report from that system to say what is outstanding, it will show you that this is the amount of debt the company has because the invoices have not been paid. Now, why is it system thinking? Because this is dependent on some sort of a framework which allows people to make decisions on the basis of output which the system is giving. And that output cannot be faulty, because what you input in terms of invoices when you generate is what you get as output. Because if that invoice has been paid, it will not be showing as debt, it will be showing as money received. But if it has not been paid, then it will show as an unpaid invoice, and that would reflect as what is called an outstanding payment. Or if it's outstanding for a long period of time, then it will be called, outstanding debt. Is that okay?
Yes.
The second type, when we look at, when we talk about personal mastery. Now, what is personal mastery? The word gives it away slightly. When I say personal, that means it is very personal to me. And when I say mastery, it is related to my individual process of learning or my experience. So sometimes you will see that within the organization, there are individuals which are very committed to learning. They are called self-motivated individuals, and they are committed to learning personally. That means they take their own initiatives, and they learn from their experience by taking initiatives. And that kind of an approach which allows the organization or the people within a particular business to learn on their own initiative is something called personal mastery. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So it is, in this case, sometimes you will see there are lots of different employees working within the company, but you will see some employees are proactive. That means they take, they ask questions, they will look at finding out more information, they will go into a bit deep, to try and understand why this problem occurred or how it can be solved. But there are some employees who will just wait on the periphery or the borderlines to find out, what was the outcome of the investigation, why this happened, what was the issue. They do not take their own initiative. So here, when I say personal mastery, learning is considered to be more than just acquiring information. So these individuals look at expanding their own information knowledge by learning and applying the skills that they learn at the place of work to be able to get the work done. And that is why it is called personal mastery. Now, when we look at shared vision, the third element, or in this particular case, the third characteristics of a learning organization, when we look at that. Now, when you know that when you work within a company, sometimes you're given an employee handbook, sometimes you're given certain documents which talk about the history of the organization, the vision and the mission of the organization. So here, when we look at the concept of shared vision, what we are actually referring to is that this is something which the organization or the business looks at developing, because it is very important for the company, organization or business to look at their staff having a same understanding of what they mean, or what they mean and what they write in some of their, say, marketing collateral. So if Tesco, for example, says every little helps, Now that has some logic and reasoning behind it. Now, when somebody joins the company at whatever level, they go through certain, things in terms of induction and process of enrollment. And this induction process makes them aware of certain things which are very important to the company: how to behave, how to dress, how to respond to customers. And in some cases, they also make them aware of the company's goal, that when you work within the company, these are the goals that you need to be working towards. And the reason why they do this is because they want the employee working or starting within the company to have a same understanding of what the owners, the board, and the management's understanding is on how the company wants to work and go forward. So this particular picture, if I say, of having a common understanding is something called a shared vision. And this vision has to be shared by all employees, all members of staff working within the organization. And this tends to help the organization learn and succeed against their competitors, because it helps align common goals and understanding of those common goals for each of the individuals, so that they work in unison. They don't work against each other, but they work kind of together to be able to achieve those objectives. And that's why shared vision encourages members to share their experiences, their learnings, which also enhances organizational learning. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then we look at say team learning. Now team learning is, the word gives it away. When I say team learning, this is basically the accumulation or some sort of benefit of a lot of individuals learning something, and then they basically become a team, and because of the team they are able to accomplish goals or certain objectives quicker as compared to if you are given a job. So the benefits of team learning is that you see that sometimes when you work with somebody very closely, you're able to learn a lot of things by observing and watching them do what they are doing. And this kind of thing shortens your time frame to learn a particular skill or a quality, just because you're observing the other person do that with regards to performing that function. Now team learning is important because it kind of allows individuals within an organization to work together, work on common goals. It also helps in sometimes looking at getting feedback from the team, which then is going to management to improve certain functions within the organization. It can also lead to what is called, sometimes they say 1 + 1 is 11 and not 2, is because the team is able to accomplish more and be more productive sometimes as against the individual. So there are lots of, advantages of working within the team, and also team learning, because of the fact that it allows the individuals working together to focus on something which they need to accomplish, and that drives them to find solutions to problems or issues that the organization is facing. So team learning allows quicker thinking, quicker learning, and sometimes you will see that certain tasks which have to be done, what the manager does or your supervisor does is puts 2 or 3 individuals to work together in that team, so that they are able to accomplish that particular task quickly. And that is why this is an important element of learning organizations. Now last but not the least, when we look at mental models, now what does mental models mean? Mental model means that sometimes you will see that if you are faced with a problem, what you say is, oh, I knew this is supposed to happen. I knew that was going to be the outcome. Sometimes you make that statement, isn't it? I know that this was going to happen. Correct? Now, the reason why you do it is because you assume that if this was not done in this fashion, or it was not done in these, if you did not follow these steps, then this is a problem that you will have. So it is by assumptions and generalizations you feel that this kind of an issue or problem has come in. So mental models, sometimes are used within learning organization, because here it allows observations to be done. So the organization wants to observe how you are going to perform in a particular situation, how you are going to take up a particular different task or a difficult task. And here the organization makes certain assumptions. That the assumption is because you've been a best performer for a number of years, if you are given this new responsibility and a new role or a new place to set up, then you're going to, be able to perform well in this role as well. Now, why is this why is this, task being given? Because they're making some assumptions basis your past experience to see that this individual is able to perform better, in this kind of situation. So here, sometimes individuals are challenged by giving new, responsibilities on the basis and assumptions that they have performed well in previous situations, so they should be able to cope and come up with solutions for this problem as well. So here the learning happens because the person is able to take up the challenge. Sometimes you're given a job and you don't have any experience of doing it, but you take this up as a challenge. What you're trying to do is you're going to challenge yourself to be able to see that can you accomplish this or can you do this. So sometimes when you see organizations employing one of the elements of learning as mental models, is because they want you to be challenged. They want you to confront, the task or the objective which has been given, and this confrontational, this kind of a, confrontational approach allows you to learn and allows you to learn very fast. And that is why mental models are also one of the, reasons why they are an element of learning organization. Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, in the slides, what I've done is I've explained these, in a bit more detail. So there have been some contributing work which has been done by Peter Senge. There has been work which has been done by Wang and Ahmed, in one of the elements of, learning organization. And you will see that some of the authors over the years, including Wang, Ahmed, and Peter Senge, have contributed to defining these 5 elements of learning organization very clearly. And what I've done towards the last is basically giving an example. As I mentioned to you earlier, 1 plus 1 does not make 2, but in some cases it makes 11, and that is why team working, system work, are put into place, because they feel teams and people are able to accomplish tasks quicker if they work it together rather than the individual working on that alone. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, let's look at very briefly, I'm conscious of the time, let's look at very briefly the elements of training cycle. So when we look at, elements of training cycle, what we want to understand is that in this case, we want to look at understanding primarily what are the key ingredients through which training can actually be done. Now, there is a concept called something called TNA. Now, TNA is basically training needs analysis. Now, this is a stage, or a 4-step stage through which organizations actually, identify if you need training. So, training needs analysis basically is a technique through which organizations look at understanding if there's a gap area, and in that gap area, if they have to retrain, reskill, or help you develop a particular skill, they will put you into a training cycle, and that would be constituting what are called the elements of training cycle. So if I go into the elements of training cycle here, what we are looking at is that first of all, TNA, when you look at it, looks at identifying, what are the needs or analyzes the needs for training. That's the first bit here on the top. The second one they look at is, if you analyzed what is the requirement for need, you need to then develop some objectives, that why and how will you accomplish that need. So I'll give you an example here. The third one talks about once the learning objectives have been designed tabulated, you then design how you will deliver a program which will cover those learning objectives. And then the fourth stage talks about, how do you implement this? Training can be done in various forms. So we look at, the types of trainings which can be given. And then towards the end, you evaluate whether the training has been successful. In some cases, you look at surveys. In some cases, you do an exam. In some cases, you look at putting the individuals to a test or a situation and see if they have learned, from the training. So when we look at the training needs cycle, what we're primarily looking at is this training, this particular systematic approach, which allows the delivery of learning to be done using a set of activities, which could be business activities, it could be a set of activities which then allow employees to basically look at picking up a skill. So when we look at, let me give you an example and explain this. Now, if we see within an organization, there are, let's look at a small business, and within that business, we have, say, we have 10 people in that business. It's a sales or a marketing organization. And what we see is that, there are three sales managers in that organization. Now, the target is given every year, and they see that the persons are able to achieve the target, but one person is not able to achieve the target, but he's always very close. He's achieving 90%, or, he's achieving 80%, but not 100%. So in order for that person to be, we need to help that person to be able to achieve the target. How will that happen? First thing is, using performance appraisal, you will identify what are the areas in which the person is lacking that skill. So the analysis, using some sort of an appraisal technique, performance management technique, allows you to pick up the need or the gap area. Now, once that's been done, what are the objectives? The objective being put is that he should be able to achieve 100%. What are the areas of weakness? So his areas of weakness could be that he's weak on telephone, calling. He's weak on probably, say, the use of IT. And because of this, he's not able to achieve, sending quotations on time, or, following up with customers on time, things like that. Now, the learning objectives are that he needs to be given training, which is on telephone etiquettes. He needs to be given training on IT, which are the two objectives through which the program is going to be put together. Then, when they design the program, how do they design the program? They design a program which is specific to that particular skill. That means he will be taking training from an organization which will allow him to understand what is telephone etiquette, telephone mannerism, how to call customers, and that will be a time-bound training. And the second would be to look at, giving him training on IT, which could be MS Office, things like that. But these are two specific trainings that he will get into. It's not that he's going to a seminar or he's going to a conference. He's going to work with a particular training company, which is a specialist in that area. And that specialist company will allow him to, pick up these two skills. Now, once he gets into the training program, the design implementation is basically how long is the program? What is the cost of the program? How long will he need to be taking a day off? So these are kind of things which are discussed by HR on that. And then, okay, 1 day training on MS Office, half a day training on telephone etiquettes, and that is going to cost this much. After the training is done, how do we test the employee? The employee is going to be looking at taking an exam, or is going to be doing a multiple choice questionnaire, and towards the end of it, achieve a certificate which shows that he successfully completed the training. And then once he's completed that, he gets into his usual day-to-day operations, and 1 month down the line, 2 months down the line, what will then happen is the organization will look at whether he's achieving his monthly target. So if his yearly target is, say, 12,000 pounds to achieve by whatever he sells, his monthly target is 1,000. Now they will check if he's achieved its monthly target. Is he exceeding? Is he still lacking? Second one, again they check, and what they are doing is basically evaluating the performance and the let's put it this way, the training that he's attended. What's the success of those trainings in terms of those helping him to achieve the targets that he was not achieving earlier, and that would be classed as something called elements of training cycle. So we look at the TNA the model, and this is the 4 or 5 step model which talks about analyzing and assessing the needs, and then that is what I've explained in these slides, how to develop objectives. Once the developing of objectives have been done, we look at design and development of the program, then basically the program itself, implementation, and towards the end the evaluation. Here you can also look at an example of a training coach. If you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to gain muscle, sometimes you end up taking coaching. Sometimes you end up going to a gym, but you're not going to the gym alone by doing the exercises yourself. But what you're looking at doing is you're meeting a coach, you're explaining the objectives that is what I want to do. I want to put on muscles, or gain muscle mass. And then the coach will put together a training program which will, towards the end of it, allow you to do that. So he will maybe prescribe some supplements. He will ask you to do some workouts, certain types of training, which will then allow you to, gain or get the body muscle mass that you're trying to get the end of the program. Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, in the third one, what we are looking at is the characteristics of training. Now, here we are looking at basically understanding what training is done and how training can be made effective. So I put the slides here, which basically talk about the approaches which can be taken for you to become, for you to basically look at, doing effective training. So sometimes you will see that organizations put you into a training, but the training program is not successful. So there are certain objectives to certain ways in which a successful training can be delivered to employees, which will help them either gain knowledge, skills, or help increase productivity or efficiency. Some of the objectives. Now this can be done provided if you follow certain key components of looking at how training can be done. So sometimes when trainings are to be done, you need to do the business case. So once the business case is created, the why training is required, you clearly know that if you go and do this training, then it will allow you to achieve that business case or that particular objective which have been set. And then follow things like sometimes these trainings are internal within the organization or external, and then also look at how do you develop these trainings in a way wherein they tend to be effective. So sometimes you go to trainings which are you are observing people. Sometimes you're involved in training yourself. Like an example of this case would be when you look at military trainings. You cannot sit in a seminar or a conference and then gain that experience. But in military or in army, when you look at trainings, people have to do it actively to be able to, finish training. So if you have to run a marathon, you have to run the marathon yourself. And when you run the marathon, that is what is called the active demonstration, or that means you are actually getting into doing the training yourself to be able to get that desired experience of how to run a marathon, which is, what are the things you go through, what are the experiences you have, and that is why it is called active demonstration. So some of these points, what I've done is I've covered in this particular learning outcome, which talks about, these 7 steps through which an effective training can actually be delivered. And these 7 steps, you need to go through briefly to cover the assessment criteria 4.3. Is that okay?
Yep.
Any questions on today's discussion?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is after the session, as always, send you a copy of this presentation and an additional handout for you to, study, which will give you some more detail on the learning outcome 4, cover things like learning organization with an example, the elements of the learning cycle, and then what are the characteristics of putting together a successful training. For merit tasks, you have to extend that into bringing your own personal self into how you would do the training and what you gain from that training. And the second part would be to look at advantages and disadvantages of different training methods. So on that, I will send you a bit of a handout to understand, what are the different types of training methods and why they have some advantages and some disadvantages.
Perfect.
Okay, brilliant. So if you have no more questions, I'll end the session here. Thanks for joining, and then I'll catch up with you next week.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.